It's not a bad story of aspiration to be able to say you started off at the local paper as just a cadet and then became its editor. But Michael McCormack has a second aspiring career to boast of. He went from helping a country politician in a campaign to win a federal government seat to becoming 2IC of the federal government. He is the Deputy PM at a time of almost unbelievable devastation for the country and the world. Michael McCormack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris.
What a year to have any leadership role in a nation. What an incredible year it's been so far.
It's been a very difficult year, Chris, and our hearts go out to those many people who've lost their jobs, who've been locked down in some situation where in areas they haven't had a COVID case for many months. Indeed, in some of those regional communities haven't had a COVID case at all, and yet they're facing restrictions to their lives and livelihoods that are unprecedented. But that's why the federal government has supporting them right throughout the whole way. $314 billion of assistance we've put down on the table to make sure, first and foremost, that we get the health outcomes we need, of course, and then, of course, to make sure we cushion the economy as best we can from these effects that have, of course, global implications. This is a global pandemic. Australia, if you compare it to any other nation in the world, has done very well, both on the health and also the economic front.
But you mentioned about country Australia and how regional areas hardly had a coronavirus case. And I wonder, you must have felt quite irate at times and probably feeling like picking up the telephone to some of these premiers and territory ministers and saying, what are you doing to that entire region of, you know, Victoria or entire region of Queensland? How can you treat regional Australia the same way you would a metropolitan area?
Oh, it's been very difficult, but Australian people who live in regional communities are very resilient, Chris, as you well know, and many of your viewers, of course, are indeed regional Australians, and they know just how resilient our country areas, our country communities are. And I always say about our regional communities, they're big enough in which to get a good cup of coffee and small enough to care. And they do care about each other. They do care about their communities. They want a bright future. And that's why I think many of them, being the compliant to a degree individuals that they are, downloaded the COVID Safe app. They went along with what the premiers asked them to do, and they endured what has been a very difficult year. But of course, we've put in place measures to enable the trucks to go across the border. Really important that we're able to get that agriculture labour force mobile. So we've put in place as a federal government those sorts of initiatives with, of course, our state colleagues, our state ministers. But it has been very difficult.
Well, some of them had to be
very pleasing.
Some of them had to be dragged kicking and screaming to do any of that.
Oh, indeed they have, and I'm very pleased that my transport ministers have been on a weekly hookup with me, and we've been able to negotiate through to ensure that there was ease of access and mobility and convenience for our truckies, because they are very much the unsung heroes of this. Of course, we've got our frontline medical personnel who've done an amazing job, and so many people have. But indeed, our truck drivers have kept the supermarket shelves stocked. They've kept the personal protection equipment, face masks, respiratory gear. They've kept it delivered to regional communities, regional hospitals, and indeed right around the nation. They've been the unsung heroes.
Chris,
and I commend them for it.
Sam?
Now, have you, seeing as you are responsible for all of Australia, I have a vested interest in asking this, have you kept an eye on what's going on in Victoria, and has it concerned you, seeing as almost entirely the greatest, all the number of deaths, just about 800 is here in Victoria? Have you thought we better step in and do something on behalf of Australia and particularly Melburnians?
Good question.
Well, Sam, indeed we have, and that's why much of the assistance, and as I said, $314 billion of assistance, much of it has gone to Victoria, and we've offered certainly Defence Force personnel, and they've been utilised by the Victorian State Government. I've got a daughter there, Sam, who lives in Melbourne, who's been up until just the other week has been locked down 23 out of 24 hours a day in a small apartment. So it's been very difficult. Of course, I've had daily contact with not only my daughter Georgina, but indeed politicians indeed my colleagues, my federal colleagues, who've been very, very frustrated. And I know we've seen the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, who is a Melburnian. I know his level of frustration for what has happened. But, Sam, it's important to note that other states and other territories have kept the rates very, very low. It's only been, unfortunately, Melbourne where the case rates have been high and the death rates have been high. And, of course, we need to acknowledge that. We need to ensure that we get through this second wave, and pleasingly, the numbers are coming down.
But the point that Sam's making
to improve further.
Go on, Sam.
You say you offered the Defence Forces, the government who you not get a straight answer out of down here, says they rejected it, or they have actually said they didn't reject it. You didn't even offer them in the first place. Just another misnomer. Why?
I think the paper trail will show, Sam, that it was offered and it was knocked back, or there wasn't a,
so why didn't you
return
insist?
response
Why
at all.
didn't you insist? Why didn't you insist on behalf?
Well, we've worked through the National Cabinet process. We've worked through the National Cabinet process, Sam. It has been, of course, a very difficult thing, and the federal government doesn't ride roughshod over the states. States have their own jurisdictional rights. The federal government cannot and has not ridden roughshod over the states in the past or in this situation. Now, the National Cabinet process has worked very well. It's been very unfortunate.
Do you really mean that? Hang on, Deputy Prime Minister. Are you really convinced that the National Cabinet has worked effectively? The states have gone out and done as they please, and they haven't had the same philosophy about living with the virus. They wanted to eradicate the virus. We got even South Australia joined in with WA and Queensland to try and eradicate the virus first.
For many of the things that have gone before National Cabinet, such as ticking off on the aviation, such as ticking off on the Transport Code, such as making sure that we get consistency for the Agricultural Code for the workers, those things have worked well. We have always followed, as a federal government, followed the best possible medical advice. So we've taken on board what Professors Brendan Murphy and Paul Kelly have said, what the Australian Health Protection Principle Committee have said, and we've followed that best medical advice. The best medical advice doesn't say that you should have border closures. The best medical advice doesn't say that you should have shutdowns of states. That has been unfortunate. Yes, we've seen case rates in Western Australia and Queensland that really have been the envy of Victoria. Victoria would love to have had the same situation. Unfortunately, we had that outbreak caused, of course, by the quarantine arrangements going astray, and that is very, very unfortunate and has proven deadly. But the federal government can't come in and take over Victoria. That's not the way the Federation was ever set up.
All right, I want to deviate from COVID-19 for just a second, if I may. You were a late political bloomer in many ways. You were gearing up for this career with the Wagga Advertiser, and you became editor from being a cadet. What was the sliding doors moment or the turning point that said to you, now I'm going to go for a federal seat myself?
My predecessor, Kay Hull, who was a very, very good local member and widely loved and respected across the Riverina region in south-west and southern New South Wales, tapped me on the shoulder very early in her first term. I'd always loved debating at school. I'd always loved, when I was a journalist and later an editor, to fight for community issues, to be an advocate for the voiceless. I'd always led the charge if ever an issue came along through the newspaper, through the columns of the print. And when Kay tapped me on the shoulder and said you should consider a career in politics, it was always something that had been in my mind because I do love community. I do love this region. I grew up in Mara, not a big community at all. Of course, born in Wagga Wagga, came from family farms, loved the region, loved the people in it, and when Kay decided to retire in 2010, I put my hand up. I had to go through, of course, the pre-selection process, and lucky enough to be pre-selected by the National Party to be their representative at that election, and then lucky enough to have garnered the most votes to be able to then become the 14th member for Riverina. It's something that it's very humbling to actually be elected by the people of the region in which you've grown up, in which you've spent so much time, and to then go into that federal parliament and represent them fiercely and proudly. It's been an absolute honour.
It's interesting you mentioned debating. It's very interesting you mentioned debating, because one of the highlights of Question Time is when you and Joel Fitzgibbon from the other side of the House decide to lock horns. Here's an example of that.
A $10 million initial contribution. I don't know why you're yelling so much. This is helping all country communities. Member for Hunter, it's time you came to the table and just behaved yourself occasionally. There are country people doing it tough, and you won't ever stop yelling out at them. You should behave yourself. You're a disgrace.
Deputy Prime Minister will resume his seat. Deputy Prime Minister will resume his seat. I'm allowing you both to calm down for a second.
How is the Deputy Prime Minister's unhinged attack on me relevant to the question which is asked? The farmers just want him to do something!
The Deputy Prime Minister will cease interjecting.
Michael, will you and Joel be sharing Christmas cards this year?
Oh, we do most years, Chris. In fact, we had a cup of tea not long after that, and we had a bit of a chuckle about it. But it's a feisty place, that chamber. Somebody once said to me, you know, if you're at the dispatch box, find somebody on the other side who is a little bit friendly and focus on them. And I said, well, fact is, there's not too many friendly eyes or friendly faces. Look, it is a chamber of debating. It is a boisterous, noisy, robust place, and you've got to be able to go to that dispatch box to put your point of view across. Sometimes people on the other side get a bit under your skin. Sometimes the issue does, but to go in there and fiercely represent the issue that you believe in and to speak up loudly and proudly is something that I'll always do. Joel had, of course, that near-death experience at the last election where he nearly got turfed out by his electors, and he's changed tack a little bit with the things that he's put forward, and I know he's got that little ginger group in Labor called the Otis Group. You know, they're all over the shop on some issues. They're very divided, Labor, but rest assured, I'm always happy to have a cup of tea with Joel and to debate the issues in which we're passionate about. That's what being a parliamentarian is all about. And I think it's a bit like a game of footy, really, for Sam. You know, you have differences of opinion on the field. Afterwards, you can forgive and forget and move on.
In the late 60s, 70s,
Absolutely.
Sam, you wouldn't have a problem throwing a punch or two when you could do that on the footy field. Would you kiss and make up in the dressing room afterwards?
Absolutely. We played it tough and hard, and we gave it and we copped it. And as Michael just alluded to, that's just a bit of theatre, mate. That's what makes it interesting and keeps everyone on their toes. And not many things are too personal, although it's getting pretty personal in politics in this day and age, particularly here and on the other side of the world. But those people who are at least civil enough to understand that while you do have a difference of opinion, you can have a robust conversation, and it's fantastic. And incidentally, Michael, I wasn't criticising you about your influence or lack of it in Victoria. I was just pleading with you to come down and do something. Please, if you could, do something. Start the...
If only I could, Sam. I live in New South Wales. We're locked out at the moment.
Well, and you see, we have collateral damage down here. We've lost the AFL football, we've lost the NRL, we'll lose the Spring Racing Carnival, we've lost the Grand Prix, we'll probably lose the Melbourne Open Tennis. We are in a state of disrepair here. That's what they should put on the number plate.
At least the horses can still go round, Sam, and I've got to say, at least the horses can still go round. I've got to say I made sure that was possible because we need our horses to be running. We need our dogs to be, of course, as well. We need that racing, pacing and chasing because it brings
we'll get plenty of that, but there'll be no one at the track.
Regional communities.
And I agree with you, Sam.
Unfortunately, that's the case. But
they should change the line on the bottom of the number plate in Victoria. Absolutely right.